Hey, welcome to Central Online. My name's Andy Beatty. I'm the preaching minister here, and I'm really thankful to have you watching along today. Really excited for this series that we're kicking off today and for the next 5 Sundays. I'm going to be talking about this idea of relationship goals. Relationship goals. And, you know, it's kind of funny. I wouldn't recommend doing this because things can get a little weird on the internet. But if you were to look for the hashtag or search relationship goals, you're going to find all sorts of stuff. Like I said, probably not a great idea to do it because some of the stuff gets pretty inappropriate pretty quickly. But then you'll see some of the stuff where, you know, it'll have this picture of this couple sitting outside, just outside of the porch, where like they're just kind of getting rained on, and it's dark and it's cool, and they're cuddled up next to each other, and they're sitting on this like wood porch, and the rain's coming down, and they're like feeding each other, you know, like just like delicate, like feeding each other, and then it'll have like the caption under that like relationship goals. And I look at something like that, and maybe, you know, I'm just getting old and like a curmudgeon, you know, at the ripe old age of 35, I look at that and think, that doesn't look comfortable. That doesn't look fun. That doesn't look cute. Like, you're sitting on a wood porch in the rain. Like, your butt's gonna hurt. You're gonna be soaked. You might get sick, you know, sitting out in the cold, in the rain. And like, why not just scoot back a little bit and stand or sit on the porch where like the swing is? Like that would be fun. And why are you feeding each other? Like, have you heard of the coronavirus? You shouldn't be touching other people's food that then goes in their mouth, let alone putting your hands that near somebody's. Like, these are not relationship goals. That's just weird. Knock it off, people, right? But we see that people do these things, and sometimes they're stuff like that. Sometimes they're cute and fun. You know, I saw this picture of an older couple, and I say older, I mean, they were older, right? And the lady was sitting on the front of the shopping cart, and the older man was pushing it with her, you know, and they were just, you could tell they were just having a blast. It's like, oh, that's fun. But then you see some of the stupid ones, some of the lame ones where it's like, okay, yep, you're sitting in the rain feeding each other. Relationship goals, right? Relationship goals. Oftentimes we look around and we see things that we like in other people's relationships, or we see things they're doing and we think, those are my relationship goals. The problem is that if we allow the world, if we allow Hollywood, if we allow our culture, if we allow the devil to define what our relationship goals are, then what our relationships should look like, then things can get out of hand pretty quickly. All of a sudden, our relationships don't look anything like what they should look like. And yet we keep striving for more and more of those earthly relationship goals. We have to know what our goal really is, or else we're going to miss the mark. We have to be the one to define what our relationship goals are. And we have to know what we're striving for. And so today and for the next 5 weeks, we're going to be talking about some very simple, practical relationship goals. But we need to understand what our aiming point is. We need to understand what a relationship goal is, what we should be aiming for, and what we shouldn't be aiming for. Because if we just want to post cute pictures and say relationship goals means we're feeding one another cake batter, well, that's not really super deep, right? And usually what happens if something's not super deep, it gets tossed and turned real easily. So what I want you to see is just how important God-honoring relationships are, right? And to do that, we're going to look at the very first book of the Bible, Genesis. We're going to look at the very first chapter of the first book of the Bible. Look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, right? And just in these first 2 chapters, Genesis 1 and Genesis chapter 2, we see that, yes, they're about creation. Yes, they're about free will and the sin of man and the curse. They're about temptation, but they're also about relationships. Right? There's 2 things that really stick out to me about relationships in the first book of the Bible. Okay, the first thing is that we can see in Genesis 1:26 that relationships existed before the world even began. Right? Genesis 1:26 says, "Then God said, 'Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. If you're following along, look at that where it says, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness. It's easy to read past this and not understand there is a relationship already in place. That's God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Relationships existed before our world even began. Before anything here was formed, relationships existed. Right? The Godhead, 3 in 1. I don't perfectly understand it. I don't think any of us do or can while we're living here. But understand this, relationships existed before the world began. Relationships are important. They are a priority. And we see that again, portrayed again in Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2. And this is really interesting, so kind of follow along if you have your Bible. Look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 3. God's talking about creating things, and he said the light was good. In Genesis 1:10, it talks about dry ground appearing and the waters gathering. And it says that God saw that it was good. Genesis 1:12, the land produces vegetation. And what does God see? God saw that it was good. Genesis 1:18, the sun and the moon, they hung, and the stars in the sky were created. And what did God see? God saw that it was good. Genesis 1:21, birds and creatures of the sea were created, and God saw that it was good. Right? Creatures in Genesis 1:25, creatures that move along the ground were created. And what did God see? You probably already guessed it. God saw that it was good. Genesis 1:31, God looks at all that he's made, and it says God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. It was all good. It was all good through creation until we get to Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. The first time that God looks at something that he's created, looks at something that's there, and doesn't say it was good. Genesis 2:18 says, the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. The first time in all of creation that he looks at and he says, it's not good, was because of a lack of relationships. It's not good for man to be alone. That's what God is saying. Relationships matter. Relationships are a priority. Relationships are one of the most important measuring sticks of a Christian life. But relationships are hard. Relationships can hurt, right? They can be challenging. I think of that movie, The Wedding Singer with Adam Sandler, where he's like, love stinks. Yeah, yeah. Right? Love can be really hard. Relationships can be challenging. In fact, you listening to this, probably some of the biggest hurt you've ever experienced in your life has come through a relationship. And maybe that relationship endured and grew through it and became even stronger. But for most people, some of the greatest hurt they've ever experienced has been betrayal through a relationship, or distrust, or being lied to, or being neglected, whatever. Relationships can be the greatest gift from God we will ever experience, but relationships can also cause some of the greatest hurt we will ever experience. In fact, some people become so jaded from being hurt by relationships that they'll wonder, is a good marriage even possible? Is a good relationship with my spouse even possible? And the answer is yes, but we have to redefine those relationship goals, right? It's got to be a little bit different from how the world is doing it. We can't use the world's version of relationship goals as Christians and expect to be successful. Great marriage is possible, but we can't do it the rest of the way the world does it. The world, statistics say that 50% of all marriages end in divorce, and that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. And what's crazy to me is that Christian divorce rates are the same. you know? And so it's like, well, maybe we need to start doing something a little bit different with our marriages. Statistics say 50% of marriages won't make it. And statistically, the younger you are, the more likely your marriage is to fail. Right? And then, you know, you could probably venture to say that of that 50% that do make it, many of them are miserable. You probably know some that are miserable. If you're watching this with your spouse, don't point at them, all right? Don't look at them, right? Just like, but you know what I mean? There are some of those that stay together just because they're doing it for the kids. Or they're staying together just because they don't know any other way. They're going to be miserable, they're going to be void of intimacy, and they're just holding on. 50% odds of a marriage even making it. And then how many of those are actually God-honoring, healthy relationships with good relationship goals? I don't have a stat on that, but I imagine that number, again, decreases. And think about it. What other area of life are you satisfied with 50% success? Think about that, right? If your kid was going to leave for school tomorrow, and I could tell you there's a 50% chance that they're going to get in a serious car wreck on the way to school, you would do something different. You would drive them, you would make sure they had their seatbelt on, make sure their airbags are working, you would make them take a different, you would prepare them, you would tell them to do something different from the way they've been doing it to lower that percentage. Think about if I told you that tomorrow 50% of all money that you have in savings is going to be gone. You would think of somewhere else to put it, somewhere else to invest it, something different to do with it, to protect it. What if I told you there's a 50% chance that you will get MS if you drink this type of coffee? 50% chance that you'll get MS if you drink. Don't you think you would switch up your brand of coffee? Which, by the way, I don't think Tim Hortons is going to give you MS. Okay, so I just don't want to be sued for that. It would just happen to be the coffee that was here on my table, right? But a 50% chance of that happening, yeah, I'm going to change what I'm doing. If somebody told me, hey, Andy, when you leave the church building today's Thursday morning, when you leave the church building Thursday morning, there's a 50% chance you're going to get attacked by a snake. And we all know snakes are the spawn of the devil. You know what I would do? I would not leave the church. Or I would get airlifted out of here. Or I'd call the cops. Or I would do something different because I'm terrified of snakes. And because a 50% chance of something failing is significant. It's significant enough to be willing to change what I'm doing, to come up with a different strategy. And here's what's crazy to me, is it takes almost 18 months to 2 years to become a licensed hairdresser in Ohio. Did you know that? There's pretty strict laws on where you can open a salon, how you can open a salon, who can do it, the sort of education and ongoing training you have to be a hairdresser. To be a licensed commercial plumber, you have to have, in Ohio, you have to have 5 years plumbing experience, 3 years business experience. You have to pass an exam. You have to pass a federal background check every year. I was talking to a plumber out at the school, and he's got to go through a fingerprint process. He's got to go through FBI background check, all sorts of stuff to be a licensed plumber. To get a driver's permit, you've got to pass a test. To coach high school football, you have to get a state pupil activity permit, which costs a lot of money. You've got to pass multiple tests, and some of those every year, some of those on a 3-year repeating cycle, and go through all sorts of certifications just to coach high school football to get yelled at by parents, right? But to get a marriage license, you just show up to the courthouse, pay your $45, and get on with it. Isn't that crazy? Like this idea of two souls becoming one. We'll talk about that next week. Two souls becoming one. And really in our culture, you don't have to prepare for that. You can just show up, pay the thing, and it's done. That's wild, isn't it? And so if we want to be different, if we want that number to look different, if we want to define relationship goals, we've got to do it a different way. We've got to invest in some real relationship goals that are God-honoring and that will change our lives. And so if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I'm not married, I'm not going to get married, so see ya. No, I'm just kidding. Keep listening, keep watching, because first of all, you never know. I know people who have said, oh, I'm never getting remarried after their spouse has passed. And then 2 years later, they're married, right? You have no idea the people God will put in your path. And maybe you will never get married or remarried. But maybe God will put you in the path of someone who needs encouragement. Put you in the path of someone whose marriage is struggling. And so maybe this message isn't just perfect for you. And I understand that. I'm delivering it. It's probably not just perfect for anybody. But maybe God is preparing you to be a light to somebody else. So I want to redeem the phrase and the idea of relationship goals. I don't care about sitting outside on starlit nights, feeding your significant other s'mores and wiping the marshmallow off their face. Like, that's cute, whatever. Relationship goals are so much bigger. Let's redeem the phrase. Let's redeem the idea in our relationship of what real goals look like. And so this week, we're just going to go over one relationship goal every week. This week, our relationship goal is simple. Seek God first. Seek God first in everything that you do. You want a healthy marriage? Seek God first in your life. Seek God first in your relationship. It seems really simple, right? The problem is most people don't do this. Most people know that this seems really simple, but they don't do it. People, when they're dating, they want that perfect person. Right? If I find that perfect person, they're going to completely make me happy, never let me down, I'm always going to be smiling, and I can't be happy until I meet that person. And they think that there's one person out there that's going to completely fulfill them, and they can't rest until they find that perfect person. I got great news for you. It ain't going to happen, okay? It's not going to happen. Here's why. We're all sinners. People are always going to let you down on some level or another. People have forgotten that the most important relationship in our life has got to be God. God comes first. Not your spouse, not your kids, not your work, not yourself. God. God comes first. The most important command, Jesus didn't say love your spouse with all your mind and all your soul and all your strength and all your heart. He didn't say that. When they said, what's the most important command? He didn't say, love your kids with all your mind, your heart, your soul, your strength. Most important command, Jesus didn't say, love your phone with all your strength and your mind and your heart and your soul. When Jesus was asked, what is the most important commandment? He answered, love who? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. His answer was make God a priority in your life. If we want healthy relationship goals, it starts right here. God has got to be the most important relationship you have. More important than your relationship with your phone, with your kids, with your spouse, with your parents, with your coworkers, with anybody you can think of. The most important relationship in your life is with God. And then let your actions reflect that. So I want to address a couple of different people that I believe are listening to this message. First of all, single people. All the single people. All the single people. All right, so anyways, single people. If you're listening to this and you're single, whether it's because your spouse has passed away, or you've been divorced and you've not remarried, or maybe you're younger, if you're single, I want you to hear this. You may not be married yet, but maybe you will be someday. Maybe you've been married and it seems like that opportunity has closed. Make this your relationship goal. I will seek God first while I prepare for my spouse. I'll seek God first while I'm preparing for my spouse. Seeking God first will prepare you for your spouse. Or if you're like, I'm never getting remarried, again, like I said earlier, let's see what God has in store. But again, seek God first so you can help prepare other people for their spouses. If you're like, hey, I'm 70 years old, I'm never getting remarried, I get it. I really understand. I truly understand that. But understand maybe God is putting other people in your life. So you seek God first in your life so that you can pour into other people and help prepare them for their future spouse. Think about everything you're doing, especially if you're younger. Right? Think about maybe you're in school, going to college, you've got homework, you're lifting weights, you're starting a business, whatever it is. The most important thing for you, though, is to seek God first. You don't have to be married to do this. Stop seeking a spouse. Stop seeking that perfect relationship here on earth, and understand that the perfect relationship that we seek and we desire only comes from God. Seek God and let Him prepare you for those relationships. Seek God and let Him prepare you to be the type of person that you would want to marry. Okay, so that's enough for the single people. Married people, listen to this. Your relationship goal is very simple. Seek God with your spouse. Seek God in your life, and then seek God with your spouse. That's what our relationship goal is, right? Rather than sitting on the porch and getting rained on and getting a cold and pneumonia and all this crazy stuff, seek God with your spouse. Your marriage will never be what you want it to be unless God plays a central role in your relationship. You can try anything and everything. You can go on couples retreats. You can do all sorts of cool date nights. You can put kids as your focal point. You can put your career as the most important thing and just make a bunch of money and be really comfortable. You can put comfort above all else. You can try so many things. But unless God plays a central role in your relationship, it's not going to be what you want it to be. What happens, and I see this a lot, especially with kids, but what happens is when we put our spouse as the priority over God, or we put our kids as the priority over our relationship with God, or our career, whatever it is, what we've done is we've created an idol. So if you put your spouse as the top priority over your relationship with God, what you're saying is God is second, or third, or fourth, or whatever, but God is not your top priority. Your spouse is, or your kids is. Kids are. And then you know what happens is you've just created a false idol. You have made your spouse or your kids or your career a false god. That's kind of scary to think about. But then here's what happens, and it gets even crazier. As if that wasn't enough, right? You create this false god out of someone you love and care about by putting them as more important than God. And then what happens is these people aren't going to meet your needs. They're not going to do things right. They're going to fall short of this pedestal you've put them on. And so what happens is pretty soon you start to demonize them. First you idolize them, and now you start to demonize them, right? And it turns into, you're not doing this right. You're not meeting my needs. You're falling short of who I thought you were. Is this really who you are now? And it turns into, oh, well, before when you were idolizing, oh, he's so laid back. He's so chill. Nothing gets him. He comforts me. Nothing gets him riled up. He's so easygoing. He's so nice. All of a sudden it turns into, he's such a bum. He has no motivation. He never shows any emotion. All he does is just lay around. He's not even a leader. Idolizing turns into demonizing. So let's be different. Let's not do that. Let's not set those people up on a pedestal above God and idolize them and then get upset when they don't live up to our expectations and demonize them. Let's seek God first. Let's be different. Here's the really cool thing. If you seek God first, you and your spouse will move closer together. Right? And there's a lot of ways we could talk about doing that. I could go on and on about practical ways. You could read the Bible together. You could worship together. You could be involved in D groups together and life groups together. And you could serve in the kids ministry and the youth ministry. A whole lot of things that I could talk about and I could spend a lot of time talking about. But sometimes it's just too much. Right? Sometimes it's just too much, and we talk ourselves out of them, and we want just one simple thing. I don't know if you've ever gone to like a commercial gym. Sometimes you go, and they're like, hey, if you sign up for this, you get a free health assessment. And you go, and they're just like, oh, okay, well, yeah, we want you to do this test, and take this, and this assessment, and this assessment. And then they come back to you, and they're like, okay, whew, boy, yeah, you got a lot wrong with you. You need to do this eating plan. You need to take these vitamins. You need to start doing this workout and this stretching routine. And make sure you foam roll and do this and that and this and buy these supplements. Stop doing this. Start doing that. Maybe think about doing this, but not that. And all of a sudden you're just like so overwhelmed that you're like, I'm not going to this gym. I'll keep paying my membership and I'll just drive by it. And that counts, right? At least for good thoughts, right? You get so overwhelmed. Sometimes we just need to start with one small, simple thing and let it snowball, right? And we see this with our health. Okay, I'm going to start this by walking a mile a day. I'm going to start by walking a mile a day and then doing some push-ups and sit-ups afterwards. Now I'm going to go 3 miles a day. I'm going to get 2 workouts in, and I'm going to get 2,000 burpees. And I'm going to do this and that. Start small. Let that momentum grow. That positive progress snowball. So here's what we're going to do. How am I supposed to seek God first with my spouse? A million different things we could look at. But how are we going to get that snowball rolling? It's very simple. Pray together. Pray with your spouse. Simple, right? But we make it challenging. We make it nerve-inducing. We don't know what to say, and we get overwhelmed, and we feel intimidated, and we grab our spouse's hands, and we don't know what to say, and we feel awkward. And then we try to seek God together. Let me tell you, there is a level of intimacy that comes from holding your spouse's hands, awkwardly not knowing what to say in a prayer, feeling uncomfortable, feeling vulnerable with your spouse, and then in that moment, seeking God together. There's a level of intimacy there that you don't get any other way. The two of you, if you're married, your soul has become one. Think about from God's perspective, these two lives that he saw, their souls blend into one. Now joining together to communicate with him, to petition with him, to share with him, to celebrate with him, to cry out to him. Think of the joy that must bring him, and think of how clear of a picture that is of what he wants us to do. 2 Chronicles 7:14, God says, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear. Then I will hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land." He's going to heal their land. I would go on to say, if he's willing to heal their land because they're willing to be vulnerable and humble themselves and pray, he's probably willing to heal our marriages. He's probably willing to strengthen our marriages. Be vulnerable. Feel awkward. Grab your spouse's hands and take that. And instead of pressing it down or ignoring it or faking it, give it to God and see what God does with that level of intimacy. I don't know how marriages make it without putting God first. I really don't. And unfortunately, I think many of them don't. And I think about, the heartache that I've faced this year. Losing one of my best friends, my sister. Watching her slowly suffer and die. I think about the stress, the physical limitations I have, the exhaustion I have, and the concerns I have. I don't know how I could do it without seeking God first, and without seeking God first with Jill. I don't know how people do it. And people will say, we don't really have time to do that. You make time. We make time for other things. You make time for TikTok, for Instagram, for Facebook, for football, for mowing, for cleaning your car, for doing gardening, whatever it is. You make time for all those other things. Can you make time to seek God first with your spouse? Because here's what I've learned. It's really hard to be angry with someone and pray with them. Have you noticed that? It's really hard to be angry at your spouse and pray with your spouse. Hard to be angry at your spouse and pray for your spouse. It's hard to hate someone that you're praying with. It's hard to commit adultery or get hooked on porn when you have a spiritual intimacy and vulnerability with someone and you're seeking God first with them. It's hard to divorce someone when you guys are seeking God first together. So pray with your spouse. Keep it simple. Pray, bless my spouse, watch over them, protect them, encourage them. And then you can get more specific. I love specific prayers. Each of my kids, I prayed for specific characteristics, and I love that God answered my prayers. Pray with your spouse for specifics. Snowball it. Watch what happens when you pray together and it grows and you get more involved in church together and you get involved in a D group and you serve together and you bring up love of God in your life interactions with other people. And pretty soon people are looking at your marriage and saying, those are the relationship goals that I want. the way they endure together, the way they pray together, the way they cling together through good and bad. Those are relationship goals. Now here's the sad reality. Family Life Institute did a survey a few years ago. They surveyed thousands of Christian couples and found that less than 8% pray together. Less than 8% pray together. And so you may walk away from today's message thinking, well, Andy didn't really tell us anything new. He didn't really tell us anything we don't know. We're supposed to put God first in our marriages. We know that. We all said our vows. We all heard the preacher our wedding day. We know that. The reality is only 8% of Christian couples are willing to put God first together by praying together. Think about that. So let me be very clear here this morning. I am asking you to seek God first with your spouse by praying with them. I want to make that very clear. I believe wholeheartedly the devil does not want you to pray with your spouse. I believe wholeheartedly the devil will do whatever it takes to get you to stop praying with your spouse, because he doesn't want your marriage working. He wants you defining your relationship goals by earthly standards, not by this rock-solid foundation of putting God first. So in my life, I've come to understand that if the devil doesn't want me to do something, I probably want to do it. So I'm asking you, I'm imploring you, seek God first with your spouse by praying with your spouse. Matthew 6:33 says, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." If you want your relationship to look like everybody else's, do what everybody else is doing. If you want something better, if you want something different, put Christ first in your marriage. Seek him first. And let's redeem that phrase, relationship goals, and transform our marriage into what it should be before God. Let's seek him first today.